Welcome back, everyone. As you can see, we've been doing a lot of the paint routine. It's been pretty hard to generate content lately. It's just been the old recondition, clean, paint, and repeat. As you can see, we've got a new steering wheel, new reproduction I picked up for it. We just finished taking the masking off of the black rim. That will replace the old cracked and split one that was on it. And, well, we've got quite the clothesline set up. Sounds like an airplane's trying to crash outside. Oh, we've got quite the clothesline set up. We'll get under it here so we can get back to our normal talking position. Yeah, it's been kind of difficult to generate content because you all have seen me scratch on metal, you all have seen me prime and paint, and we've just been doing it over and over again because our weather pattern lately has been very conducive to laying down paint. It's been extremely dry here. We've just come off of the driest May 1st to June 15th on record, and not by a little bit, by a lot. So we've been running flat out as well, trying to keep our garden alive because, well, irrigating out of our pond every other day. Pond is about at 50% level already. We're starting to get nervous. 30 more days, we might be out of watering if the weather pattern does not improve. But it's been very, very good for filling the clothesline full of freshly painted parts. And as long as I'm on the kind of the talking front, there's a few frequently asked questions that have been coming up over and over again in the comment section. We'll hit the first one right now. Any word on your heads getting done? Any word on the head? So what is the head outcome and how much are you going to do to freshen up the engine? I've answered this question probably 20 times already, and it just keeps coming up over and over and over again. I can always tell who doesn't bother reading through the comment section before they start typing. No, it's my job to read every comment under every episode. I do it religiously, and I try to stay as engaged with the comment section as I have time to do. That being said, if I had to pick one pet peeve from YouTube, and don't get me wrong, YouTube is the best job I've ever had, and I love doing it every day, but if I had one pet peeve, probably the biggest one, it's when I answer the same question 5 times under an episode, and then I come back the next day, and there are 5 more of the same identical question that's been asked as if it hasn't even been discussed yet. So, word on the cylinder head. When I dropped it off, they told me it was going to be 3 to 4 weeks before they were going to be able to get to it because there aren't many machine shops left around here, and the ones that are still in business are extremely busy all the time. So we have not yet hit the 4-week mark. It could still be sitting up there, hopefully, being ready to be brought to the forefront at any time. That being said, I'm hoping that cylinder head pans out and is good. They were going to do a crack test on it first, and if that all checks out, then they thought that they were going to have to do probably all 8 valve seats because they were all hammered way up in deep. It's going to need a significant planing on the head gasket surface. Long story short, I wasn't loving what I saw with that cylinder head, but if it tested out good initially, they were pretty confident they were going to be able to fix it. So I'm still waiting on word from them. A couple different directions we could go. Let's get under the clothesline again with the engine. And I'm waiting on word from the machine shop about the head before I really do much with this at all because, well, I've got the flat top pistons in this engine, and the head I've got there is the dedicated gasoline version head. Farmall H has had 2 different cylinder heads. This is a gasoline version right here. They also had a distillate version. The distillates are easy to find because nobody wants them. My local tractor salvage yard has about a dozen distillate Farmall H heads sitting on the shelf that nobody wants. They're just hoping they can sell them someday. The main difference is the distillate heads have a combustion chamber that is recessed a lot deeper than the gasoline style heads. What that recessed combustion chamber does is it lowers the compression ratio and makes it easier for them to burn a wider range of fuels. So the gasoline heads like this one and like the one at the machine shop have the shallower combustion chamber. That means that the valves are longer in these than in the distillate heads. And I'm really hoping we can stick with the dedicated gasoline cylinder head for this engine. If we ended up having to go with the distillate head because it ends up being all that I can find that is good, at that point, I would be replacing pistons and sleeves in the engine and going with the, they're not really a dome top, but they call them a fire crater piston, where they have a raised head on them to go in conjunction with that lower compression distillate cylinder head to put you close to where you would be compression ratio wise with flat top pistons like I have now and the dedicated gasoline head. Hopefully that's making sense and I haven't lost everybody. So if that gasoline head checks out, we can leave the engine alone, because nothing else in that engine's really bad at all. It's got very few hours on it. If I end up having to go with the distillate head, I will be doing sleeves and pistons in the engine as well. We've really been just kind of getting closer and closer to this piece right here with everything that we've been doing all around it. The original plan was to, not have any problems with the engine and have this piece already in paint to go along with the front bolster and the front wheels. This would have already been a rolling chassis well before we got to the drawbar and the toolbox and the electrical box and the starter push button and the throttle and the hydraulic lever and all of the drawbar brackets, and we're even doing engine throttle brackets and the gauge plate and the drawbar roller. And I've just been doing basically busy work lately, throwing paint down while it was conducive to do so, and just hoping that we get a call back from the machine shop one of these days with good news on the cylinder head. And the other most frequently asked question, does anyone know why Farmall did make the front tires have so much camber? What is the reason for these old design tractors that have the front wheels set so close together? I've never seen it on modern tractors. Silly question, but what's the thinking of the front tires being oriented in that configuration? Looking good. Got to be hard to not scratch the paint work, but I have a question. Maybe you can do a video on this. Why the front tires look like a V, and what is the advantage from a wide front end to a narrow front end? I never did understand that. So what we're talking about here is the way these front tires V down to be closer together at the bottoms than they are at the top. And another thing to look at, as long as we are on the subject, the design of the pedestal here. So if we rotated the shaft and pedestal vertical, you'd notice that everything beneath this 4-bolt flange with the pedestal cants to the rear a little bit. So the reason for these setups was A, ease of steering. Power steering was not a thing back in 1945. At least it was not common on farm tractors. So having this pedestal canted to the rear just a little bit aids in front wheel returnability to the straight ahead position. All right, so traveling in a forward direction with a canted back pedestal, those wheels are going to want to be straight ahead more than they're going to want to be pointed off to one side or the other. And having front wheels that are set closer together at the bottoms aids in overall steering, and it requires less effort at the steering wheel to turn those wheels side to side. That's the first talking point. The second talking point for this design is that row crop cultivation was a big thing with this era of tractors. We didn't have the pesticides and the spraying equipment that we do now to take care of weeds. We had to go and straddle rows, crop rows with these things with cultivated attachments mounted to the tractor and actually root the weeds out from between the row crops. So with front wheels that are set very close together at the bottoms, that also gave you a much narrower footprint at the front. So you'd mount up the cultivator equipment and you would straddle the crop rows. One row would go between the front wheels and the back wheel here, another row between the front wheels and the back wheel here, and you could take weeds out from all around all that stuff without running anything over that you wanted to keep growing. Also, while cultivating, it was common practice to get to the end of a row, raise the cultivator. The operator would then turn the steering wheel and the front wheels all the way around to the stop. They would lock the brake for the inside back wheel and pretty much pivot the tractor around on this back wheel to do a very, very sharp pivot turn to line in with the next series of rows so that they could then drop the cultivators and carry back on with no gaps in between. And having these front wheels placed so close together at the bottoms meant that they would scrub a lot less in the headland as the tractor made that very tight turn to head back the other way. Narrow front tractors turn a lot sharper than wide front tractors can because those front wheels can pivot around so far. So that's a big reason why you don't see narrow front tractors really being built so much anymore is because we don't do that same kind of row crop cultivation. But wide fronts were still an option back in 1945. They're very handy for doing things like hay crops. With a wide front tractor that had the front wheels on the same track as the rear wheels, you could straddle a windrow of hay that's just as wide as the wheel spacing of the tractor without running it over with a narrow front wheel set and pushing that windrow back into the ground right before you're going to roll it over and turn it with the rake or try to pick it up with the baler. So wide fronts were handy for things like that back in the day, as well as loader work. So if you put a loader on a tractor, you're much better having a wide front end because you have a lot more support on that wide axle, and the axle pivot brackets actually bolt in several places on the bottom of the bolster and even back to the frame rails for extra support, extra load. You can fit a loader on a narrow front tractor, but the problem is all of your weight then of your loader and whatever you're picking up is going to solely be on that thrust bearing on that vertical shaft and being completely taken by just this part of the bolster right here. So a wide front is very much preferred for loader work, and just about every modern tractor is designed and built with a loader package ready to go onto it. So that's another reason why you really don't see narrow fronts anymore. I think I'm going to wrap this episode right here. That concludes the answers to the top 2 most frequently asked questions that I've been seeing lately. And I think I'm going to get into like seat frame rebuild next. I've got everything on hand for that. We can reseal the hydraulic belly pump unit. I can refurb an air cleaner and just a few other associated control rods. And at that point, we're pretty much ready for engine. So I'm hoping the timing with everything in the machine shop just lands just so. Fingers crossed. It would be nice to be able to just keep right on rolling without having any kind of setbacks. So thank you for watching, everyone. When there is any news on the cylinder head, I will report it. Hope to see y'all back again. I gotta get her on the clothesline. Oh man.